honor.
And it's an honor to lift our voice and sing
To the living God.
to the living God.
No one can deny.
No one can deny
that Jesus Christ.
that Jesus Christ is the Most High. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Last week, we started a brand new sermon series. We left perfection, understanding what it means to be perfect in God, and we moved into this thing. As I was traveling, I kept hearing the same message over and over again. And the message was about the fact that God is a fascinating God. He has so much power. He has so much love. He has so much compassion. And sometimes we get so caught up in running and trying to be in this place and trying to be in that place and trying to accomplish this thing that we forget how fascinating God is. How awesome He is. How amazing He is. And as we travel throughout the Mid-South and I guess the Southwest, we saw it. It was on display at every mountain that we saw, every tree we saw. But it was also on display with all the people that we met along the way. And so what I want to do for the next few weeks is just kind of bring in some of what God was speaking to me as we travel. I want to bring that into you for the next couple of weeks. Last week we talked about how fascinating it is what God can do with trials. That in the middle of a trial, God can bring in joy. That's how powerful and how awesome He is, that the worst thing going on in your life can be the actual thing that brings you the most joy. And this week, I want to talk with you because as we traveled, I became fascinated by what God can do if we don't give up. I looked around. We were in New Mexico. We were in Albuquerque, and Shaka and I, and we came across the oldest church in New Mexico. Now we're down in the town center. Well, it's the old town center because they've long since moved downtown and built big, beautiful buildings. But we went down to the place where it started, and we stood in front of this beautiful 200-year-old plus church. And as I was standing there, God began to speak to my heart. As I was standing there looking around the city, you could see all this new construction. You could see some construction that probably happened about 50 years ago, but nothing had been there for 200 years. And I was just blown away. I was blown away. I was fascinated by how God could establish a church in the middle of a city. And through depressions and recessions and through all types of weather problems and everything else that took down every other building in the area, that church still stands. So when I got back, I started to flip through and I wanted to see that picture again because I was so fascinated by God's ability to take some people just like us and keep them going for 200 years. And as I began to look at this picture, God began to speak to my heart. He showed me three things in this picture that we should never give up on. Go back, Angela. The first thing He showed me was this church. And you know what? We should never give up on God. We should never give up on the church. But the second thing that He showed me was this beautiful lady right here. And what God began to speak to my heart was, listen, not only should you never give up on me, I don't care what the circumstances are, but you never give up on family and those people that I put in your life. Amen. And then I looked a little bit closer at the picture. And I saw this rascal right here. And what God said to me is, not only do you never give up on me, not only do you never give up on those people that I put in your life, but you never give up on yourself. Amen. And what God began to show me was in various times of my life, I was at wit's end with my struggle, with the thing that was coming against me. And I was in a particular situation where I was either thinking about giving up on God, thinking about walking away from people who love me, or thinking about giving up on myself. And what God began to show me in this instance is there are three things that we all are responsible for, three things that we can never give up on. We can never turn our back on God. We can never turn our back on those people that God has put under our care. We can never turn our back on ourselves. I don't care what kind of mistakes we've made in the past. But then God began to show me something else. He began to show me that there are three things, three forces is what I call them, that are really trying to make me give up on these three things that God has made important in my life. The first thing that's coming against me is really trying to get me to give up on my wife, give up on my God, give up on myself. It's this world that we live in. This world that tries to redefine what it means to be a man, what it means to be married, what it means to be a child of God. But not just the world, but my flesh. Paul talks about these things. Paul talks about this Roman Empire, the world, that's always coming against him. It's always beating him up. Poor Paul, he's been shipwrecked. He's been beat. He's been flogged. He's been bit by a snake. This world is really coming after him. But Paul doesn't just put it on the world.
Right.
Paul said there's another force that's trying to make you give up, make me give up. And that second force, that's your flesh. That's your own self. That's that thing where you want to do something that takes you away from the thing that God, you want to do something that takes you away from God. You want to do something that takes you away from your family. You want to do something. Your flesh is pulling you this way. Your flesh is telling you, listen, you don't need your family. Forget about yourself. All you need is to go please me. And then the final thing, and Paul talks about this throughout his writings in Corinth, is the enemy in general. And listen, you can try to deny the devil if you want to, but trust me, there is an enemy out there who is working against God's people day and night. He does not sleep or slumber. He's walking around looking for somebody that he can torment. And so what Paul begins to do, and I want to go to a very familiar passage. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 4. This will be some scripture that you guys have seen before. And what Paul starts to do is he starts to give us some advice. He starts to give us some direction on not giving up. And for somebody, listen, for somebody here today, this is so important for you to get, because you are on the edge of giving up on something that's inside of one of those three categories. You know that. It's either God, you know that it's somebody that you love, that you're responsible for, or you're about ready to give up on yourself because you keep falling in the same sin, you keep making the same mistakes, you've been suffering too long. And what Paul begins to do is he begins to educate us around what it means to not give up. And he starts by showing us that there are multiple ways, two ways in which we give up. Let's read a little scripture. He says in verse 1, he starts out by saying, look at this. Therefore, since we have this ministry, since God called you, since God has accepted you, invited you into the family, because we were shown mercy, through his mercy. We didn't deserve to be here. We didn't deserve to be children of God. But it was through his mercy that he accepted us into the family. He said, we do not give up.
Amen.
Because we've been given this opportunity, we're not going to quit. Because God opened his arms and welcomed us into his grace, we don't stop. He says in verse 2, he says, instead of stopping, instead of giving up, instead of quitting on God, instead of quitting on that special person, instead of quitting on yourself, we have renounced shameful secret things. Not walking in deceit or distorting God's message. We're not changing the word around. But commending ourselves to every person's conscience in God's sight by an open display of the truth. Now I want you to look at these words. See, what Paul's talking about here is this situation about which you give up, but you haven't quit. And as I was reading through this, God began to show me. He said, we don't do these things. We don't walk in deceit. We don't have these secret lies. We don't do this stuff. But there's a time in your life where you quit on something but you don't quit? Well, where you give up on something, and what you start to do is you start doing the opposite of what you should be doing. That's a time in your work life where you didn't walk out the door right. You just stopped doing the work. You just started coming late. You just didn't care, didn't have any regard for people there. You just didn't care about the job no more. You didn't walk off, but you were no longer there. You had gave up. Married folks. There are times in a marriage where you don't, maybe you haven't moved out, maybe you haven't signed the papers, maybe you haven't gotten a lawyer, but you have gave up. You are not actively doing the things that a wife or a husband should do. Listen to me, singles. There are times in our life when we ain't stopped going to church. We have walked away from God. But we ain't quite living like we're supposed to be living. And in our minds, we think, that's why Paul brings this out. In our minds, we think we have not gave up. But what Paul is saying is, there is a situation in which you didn't quit, you didn't walk away, but you gave up. And the reason why Paul is explaining that to us is because he knows the next step is that you completely walk away. Let's go a little bit further. He says, the first way that we give up is that we give up without giving in. Is that we quit, but we don't walk off the job. We quit, but we don't divorce. We quit following God. We quit reading. We quit doing all the things that we used to do. And what Paul is showing us is that this is a dangerous first step toward this second step. Let's read a little bit further. He says, we are pressured in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. He says, we are persecuted, but not abandoned. We are struck down, but not destroyed. Verse 9, he says, we always carry the death of Jesus in our body, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. And what Paul begins to do, look at these words I got highlighted. Persecuted. He's saying we go through times when folk are just coming against us, trying their best to hurt us. We're pressured. Things at work, things at home, we just feel like we just can't even think right because so many things are coming at us. He says we get to this place sometimes where we're perplexed. You're sitting around scratching your head. I don't even know what that was about, God. What was that about? Why did that happen? He says we get to a place sometimes where we get struck down. You know what I'm saying? You get knocked down on your back. He says we're always in a situation by which we're going to have these forces coming at us. We're going to have the world coming at us. We're going to have all these forces trying to take what's ours away, trying to make us give up on God. We're going to have our flesh coming at us. We're going to have the enemy coming at us. And what Paul begins to point to is that the second way we give up, is that we outright quit because it's just too hard. Being a Christian is just too hard. It's just too much. And so Paul gives us two things. He says, listen, you need to be careful of giving up, whether it be through just giving in, just not trying hard, just not moving forward, or whether it be through you just outright walking away. For those three areas of your life, whether it be me, your God, whether it be those people that I put in your life, those ordained people, your family, your close friends, your church members, whether it be you yourself, you don't need to give up under any circumstances. So how do we avoid giving up? How do we get to a place? Because we're all going to have trials. We talked about that last week. We're all going to go through things. There are going to be things happening around us at all times. We're going to feel perplexed. We're going to feel like we're pressured. We're going to always feel like things are coming against us too hard for us to handle. But how do we avoid Giving up. Let's go back to verse 2 real quick. He says, instead of giving up, we have renounced shame for secret things. He says, we don't do stuff. We don't do the wrong thing. We don't have a secret life. We don't do things when people can't see us. We try to do the right thing at all times. He says, not just that, but we don't walk in deceit. We don't distort God's message in order to make our lives right. We don't try to change the message of God into something that fits what we want it to fit. He says, but commending ourselves to every person's conscience in God's sight by an open display of the truth. We live in truth. He says, but if our gospel is veiled, he says, if there's an issue and the folk can't see the gospel through you, it is veiled to those who are perishing. It's not because of you. It can't be because of something you did. Listen, people can't come to God because of mistakes that you make. He says, in their case, the God, Lord G, of this age, talking about the enemy, has blinded their minds of the unbelievers so they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. And what Paul is explaining is, listen, if folk don't see God, if folk don't come to God because during your ministry you out reaching out to people and you're trying to get folk to God, and if they don't come to God, if they can't understand the mysteries of what it means to follow Christ, it can't be your fault. But he also warns that enemy, that thing we talked about that's trying to come against you, that's trying to hurt you, that very enemy might be blinding them. But what Paul teaches us, and it's a very important thing, is that the way we avoid giving up is to have integrity. Listen, this is very important. Because when you're going through something, if you don't have integrity, one of the fastest ways for you to give up is for you to start doing the wrong thing all the time, for you to start sinning, for you to get in places where you shouldn't go, for you to turn to things that you shouldn't turn to, because those things, they call them gateway activities for a reason. They open a door for you to walk down a portal that you don't want to walk down. And what Paul is saying to us, listen, he's saying that we have to have integrity in our walk, that when we're out there, no matter what the trial is, no matter what we're going through, we have to keep integrity. We cannot allow our circumstances to let us walk away from being integral. Go a little bit further. He says, in verses 5, he says, for we're not proclaiming ourselves, but Jesus Christ is Lord, and ourselves as your slave. He's saying we're not trying to put ourselves up. We definitely never should be trying to put ourselves up. But we need to be pointing everybody back to the fact that Jesus Christ is the Lord, and we're just slaves. We're just out in the vineyard. We're just workers. He says, for God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of God's glory in the face of Jesus Christ. We've got to be in a place, guys, where everything that we do, that's our mission, right, is to lift up Christ in everything that we do. That's why we're called Uplift, because we believe that our mission is to lift up Christ in everything that we do. And we believe that once we lift him up, he has the ability to do all the fixing. He has the ability to do all the healing. He has the ability to do all the saving. And what Paul is saying to us over 2,000 years later is, listen, let's not put ourselves first. Let's not ever make this about the members at Uplift. Let's not ever make this about Lionel Means the Christian. But let's always make this about Jesus Christ. He says, now, we have this treasure in clay jars, in earthly vessels in some of your versions, so that this extraordinary power may be from God and not from us. Paul goes just a step further. Not only should we not put ourselves up, not only should we put Jesus up, but you need to understand, I need to understand that the power that we possess, if we have any power at all, it doesn't come from us. It all comes from God. Matter of fact, Paul compares our bodies, who we are as individuals, to these earthly vessels, to these clay pots, which would have had hardly no value. These kind of pots, when they broke, would have just been thrown back in the fire and made into new pots. And what Paul is saying is, there's nothing special about this, about us, about the flesh, but it's all about what God put inside of us. That's what a special thing is. It's not the thing that's holding the good news. It's not the thing that's holding the Spirit of God, but it's the actual Spirit itself. That's where the power comes from. That's where the healing comes from. That's where the speaking comes from. That's where the speaking in tongues. Any other gifts that you see exhibited, it comes from this internal thing. It's not about you. It's not about me. And the second thing that Paul shows us, if we want to know how to avoid giving up, we got to learn how to stay humble. Listen, there are just too many marriages, too many friendships, there are just too many jobs lost over arrogance. Because two people were not humble with each other, because one person said things that they couldn't back off of. When we're going through something, it is vitally important that we remain humble. Humility has to be our guide, especially when we're going through. James said last week, we've got to be listening, not talking, and not getting angry. Let's go a little bit further. He says, verse 8 and 9, we're pressured in every way, but not crushed. Paul says that we've got all this pressure coming on us, pressure at work, pressure at home, pressure in school, pressure on the news, just pressure all the time. I cannot remember a time like this when I felt so much pressure. He says, but don't worry, you're not going to be crushed. Amen. He says, we are perplexed. I can't figure it out, God. I don't know what's going on. I have no idea how we ended up with this candidate. I have no idea. None of it makes sense to me. But not in despair. Amen. I'm not going to let what's going on in the world cause me to be despair. I'm not going to let the perplexities of my life cause me to sit in despair. He says we are persecuted. They treat me bad at work. They treat me bad in the church. They treat me bad in the community. But not abandoned. No matter how bad they treat me, God, you are with me. Isaiah said, when I was in the middle of the river and I thought I was going to drown, you kept me floating. He said, when I was in that river and it tried to knock me over, you stood me up. He said, when I was in the fire, you wouldn't let me be burned. He says, we're struck down, but not destroyed. Somebody needs to hear that today, because you've lost something great. You've been through something that's very hard, but listen, you are not destroyed. You've been struck down. I know it doesn't feel good down there, but listen, if you don't give up, God will get you up. You have not been destroyed. Listen, God has not failed you. He has not forgotten about you. And I am fascinated by what God is going to do if you just don't give up. The third thing he shows us is that we want to really avoid giving up. We've got to learn how to persevere despite the circumstance. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what the odds look like. It doesn't matter what Google says. I told you that last week. It doesn't matter The only thing that matters is that you have a God with all power. He has the ability to guide you through every circumstance of your life. He has the provisions to provide for you. And he has the compassion, the love, the mercy to do it. He wants to do it. Verse 10 says, we always carry the death of Jesus in our body. You know, we got to go through some things. We have to understand. Paul talks about this a lot throughout the New Testament, that this walk with God, with following Jesus, is hard. He said, but you need to understand, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. The reason why we're dying each day, the reason why we appear to be weak, the reason why we cry sometimes, the reason why we feel like we can't go forward is so that God's strength can be manifest in our situation, so that folk can see some of what we're going through and understand that serving God gets you through it.
That's good. That's good.
He says, for we who live are always given over to death because of Jesus, so that Jesus' life may also be revealed in our mortal flesh. He says, in your weakest times, in your hardest circumstances, the things that you've been through that you thought nobody saw, let me tell you something. You encourage somebody by not giving up.
That's right.
But by not walking away, by continuing to work hard at work and not giving in, you encourage somebody. By keeping it together, by not walking away, by not giving up, by not quitting, God used you to encourage somebody.
Amen.
He says, so death works in us. You need to understand that there's a different kind of rule at play, that the world system, where it's all about living in life, it's the opposite in Christianity. This is all about sacrificing in death. This is all about allowing a little bit of you to die every day and a little bit more of Jesus to come to life in you. He says, and since we have the same spirit of faith, in keeping with what is written, I believe, therefore I spoke. We also believe, and therefore speak. Let me show you. What Paul is telling us is that we need to get to a point where we're willing to sacrifice for what we believe in. Where we're willing to go out and tell people about Jesus. We're willing to help people who are struggling through our situations. We're willing to let them know what our faith is, what we believe, what we know, what God has done for us. We're willing to sacrifice. We're willing to give something that's important to us in order to help out others and in order to help more people come to Christ. What Paul tells us is we got to get to a place where if we really believe what we say we believe, I mean, if you really believe what you say you believe, it's going to require for you to sacrifice. You're going to have to give up something. It says, therefore, we do not give up. Paul starts to tell us about what that reward is for not giving up. He begins to speak to us. If you don't give up, if you hang in there with those three things, those three areas, that thing that you think about giving up, Paul begins to explain what the benefit of it. He says, therefore, if we do not give up, if you do not give up, even though our outer person is being destroyed, even though you're being destroyed on the outside, you're broken, you're hurting, can't sleep at night, you don't know what to do, it's painful what you're going through. But if you don't give up, your inner person is being renewed day by day. Paul says the first benefit, the first reward of you not giving up is that you become a newer and better person every day that you hang in the fight. Every single day that you decide that you're going to get up and going to keep walking forward, that you're not going to quit, God renews you and He makes you into a better person, a person that can be used by Him, a person that can make a difference in this world. He says, for our momentary, this is how he talks about it, momentary light affliction is producing for us an absolutely incomparable, eternal weight of glory. Paul says, listen, if you hang in there, not only will your life be better on earth, but listen, God is filling up your bucket. He's filling up your bucket. Every time he sees you sacrificing, every time he sees you living with integrity, every time he sees you going that extra mile, not quitting, not giving up, he's just adding a drop in that bucket. He's just filling you up.
Amen.
And while your life here is going to be great, one day this life will end, and up there, you will have much stored up.
Amen.
So, I want to tell you a quick parable about this broken pot that I came across. And it's this man, he's a pot, he carried water for a living. And every day he'd take 2 pots, put a stick across his neck, and he'd walk from the well all the way to the king's mansion. And over time, one of the pots got cracked up and was dropping a lot of water out. And so he would start walking, and by the time he made it to the king's mansion, one pot would be completely full, the other pot would be halfway full. And so over time, this halfway full pot got tired of hearing from the full pot of how sorry he was, how many mistakes he made, how much water he lost. And so over time, this halfway full pot, this broken pot, went to the worker and said, hey, why don't you replace me? I dropped half of my water out. I never make it with what you put in me. I don't know why you keep giving me another chance. I'm just a broken pot. You ought to throw me back in the fire. And the worker looked at the pot and he said, next time we go back to the well and we walk all the way back to the master's house, I want you to pay attention to the flowers on the side of the road. And in that way, you won't be so much worried about your brokenness and all the issues that you have. And so they went back to the well. He filled up both pots, and you got this good pot not dripping a drop. And you got this broken pot on the other side, just paying attention to the flowers. And it worked. Got all the way back to the master's house. He said, man, those flowers were beautiful. He got ready to empty them. He said, oh no, I'm half full again. He looked at the worker. He said, I'm no good. You gave me this tip. It helped me get through it. I saw all the flowers. I appreciate it. But I need to be thrown in the fire because I'm no good. And that worker said to him, he said, listen, I want you to understand this. All along that road, I planted those seeds on the side in which you leaped. And every time we walked up and down that road, you watered those seeds. I used your brokenness to make those beautiful flowers. And now every day, I'm gathering those flowers and I'm taking them into the king's mansion and I'm sitting those flowers on the king's table. Every day, because of you, I'm able to provide the king with all these beautiful flowers. Let me talk to somebody today who's thinking about giving up. You're thinking about giving up because things are not going the way that you thought they would go. You're thinking about giving up because of the images of the world and the standards that have been put above on you. You feel like you can't live up to. You're thinking about giving up because of the brokenness in your heart, the brokenness in your body. You believe that God can't use you. But let me tell you something. If you don't give up, if you just hang in there, if you just keep going forward, God is going to use your brokenness and what He allows to leak out of you to take so many people to the Father's table. If you just hang in there, listen to me. If you just hang in there, God is going to use you in this generation. He's going to use you in the church, in the community. He's going to use you in your family. He's going to use you among your friends. God is going to use your brokenness. You don't have to be fixed.
Amen.
I know it's been a hard life. I know you've been through some things. I know you're hurting, but God is wanting to use your brokenness and the thing that He put on the inside of you to make a difference in this generation. I want to encourage you because it is so important that you hear me. Don't you give up. I understand how hard your trial is. I understand what you're faced with. I understand what it feels like. I understand sometimes at night you can't sleep because you're crying. I understand. But I also understand that Jesus can use that brokenness, that hurt, that pain to make a difference in this generation. And so I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to not give up on God. I don't care what it looks like. Don't turn away from the church. Don't you turn around. Don't you let nobody tell you that you're better off not communing with the saints.
Amen. That's true. Amen.
I want to talk to somebody about a family situation, whether it's a husband, whether it's a wife, whether it's a sister, it could be a cousin, an auntie, whatever it is. Don't you let nothing in this world separate you from those people who love you. Listen, when it all comes down, and it will one day, they'll be in your corner. And I want to talk to somebody who's broken. You've made some mistakes. You're hurting. And you're thinking about giving up. Not necessarily giving up on God, not necessarily giving up on family, but you're thinking about giving up on yourself. You don't believe in yourself anymore. I want to tell you something. Listen, God believes in you. He will use you. And if you just don't give up, listen, don't give up. God has better things in store for you. Am I promising you He's going to change your situation? No. Am I promising you that He's going to fix everything and make everything great? No, there are enough. But listen, there are enough preachers that'll promise you that. You can find that. Google it. You can find that too. But what I'm telling you is that you are valuable. I know you just feel like a clay pot, but you're so valuable to the kingdom. You're so valuable to me, to this church. You're so valuable to your family. I don't care what they said and what they made you feel like. Listen to me. You are valuable.
Amen. Amen.
I want to challenge somebody today who's thinking about giving up on one of those three things, whether it be God or the church, whether it be your family or a loved one, or whether it be yourself. I want to challenge you to become the best broken pot you can become.
Amen.
Don't give up. No matter how hard it gets, don't stop. Don't give up.
Amen.
I want to leave you with this thought. If I don't give up, God will keep filling me up. I don't care what your situation is. Listen to me, somebody. I don't care how bad you think it is. I understand the hurt and the pain. But if you don't give up, God will keep filling you up. He'll keep replenishing you. He'll keep getting you up off the mat. He'll keep standing you up. He'll hold you up if need be. He'll never abandon you. I understand it feels perplexing right now, but listen, there's no need to be in despair because you got a God that will always be there. I stood in front of this 200-year church, and I thought to myself, you know what? If we don't give up, we can be here 200 years from now. That church was 3 years old at one time, just like us. But you know what? They never gave up. And 200 years later, they're still affecting the community. And that could be us. Why not us? I looked at that beautiful lady up there with me.
Amen.
And I thought, you know, after 17 years, man, we sure have had our ups and our downs. But if we can just hold on and not give up, if I don't give up on her and she don't give up on me, look what God can do with this. I looked at that old rascal on the side. And I couldn't help but think after all the mistakes that I've made, after everything that I've done, if I could just stand in there, be on my own side, just encourage myself, just keep myself going, God can even use me. I want to say something directly to you, Ashaki. I love you. When I was thinking about this, you know what I thought about? I thought about this one thing. I said, you know what? If we ever, one day we got to kind of be separated, one day we got to die, go different ways, right? And I want you to know, not part of the sermon, I want you to know that if I go before you, that I'm going to be up there waiting on you until you come through. You hear me? Because you mean everything to me. I will never give up on you. And I want you to know this too, because if you go before me, listen, I'm going to be counting the days until I can get there to be with you. And if it's possible, I don't know if it's possible. I don't know what heaven's going to be like. You know, I don't know. But I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that we are together. I'm never going to give up on you in this life or the next. Anything in my power, anything that I can do, I will always be there for you, and I will never give up on you. Do you hear me? And I love you with all my heart. To this church, listen, as your pastor, I want to let you know, I will never give up on you, and I will never give up on God. That I'm going to do everything in my power to have integrity, to sacrifice, to make sure that I'm being there for each and every one of you. I'm going to do everything that I can possibly do to never give up on you or never give up on this church. If you ever need somebody to be in your corner, I might be in your corner telling you what you did wrong. But I'm committing to you today that I will never leave your corner. I will never give up on you. And I just believe, I'm just crazy enough to believe that if we become a place where we don't give up on our mates, if we become a place where we don't give up on our children, we become a place where we don't give up on our community and on our leadership, if we become a place where we don't give up, we don't quit, and we actually change this world. To God be the glory.
Here we stand in the presence of our Savior.
It's an honor
And it's an honor to lift our voice and sing
to the living God.
to the living God.
No one can
No
deny
one can deny
that Jesus
that
Christ
Jesus Christ